Welcome back to the Backseat Startup Podcast, where we give unsolicited advice to strangers on the internet.
Today I'm joined by Raj Bagri, founder of Kapture. Raj, thank you so much for being on the show. Can you share a little bit more about your background?
Hey Luke, thanks for having me today. I'm really excited to be here. So my name's Raj and I'm the CEO and founder of Kapture. Kapture is decarbonizing diesel generators. We have developed carbon capture and storage technology that can be retrofitted to a diesel generator, and it captures the CO2 emissions before they are emitted into the atmosphere. And we have developed a world-first solvent that is non-toxic and non-hazardous. And this means once the CO2 emissions are captured, we can discard the byproduct directly into soil, and the soil locks away the CO2 permanently. It works really similar to biochar.
Yeah. Great background. It's such amazing tech. We're so excited to be talking with you and sharing your story across our socials and our platforms. So thank you for taking the time. And as you know, this is the show where we give unsolicited advice to strangers on the internet. So we will head over to Reddit, find a question asked by a founder, and you and I will give our thoughts.
Sounds good.
Let's jump in.
Okay. Yeah.
All right, great. So I will read this for the sake of the listeners. This post is titled, "Why did you create your startup?" Of course, you have to be passionate about the product or service you're offering, but did your motivation come from wanting to experience the thrill of growing a company from scratch, and you therefore decided you wanted to launch a startup before you thought of the idea? Or did you think of a great idea that you were so passionate about that you decided to turn it into a business? So I'm really excited for you to share your thoughts on this. Wherever in your story you want to get started, I would love to hear how you came up with the idea for Kapture and what gets you out about in the morning.
Thanks, Luke. I was working on a food tech company and we had developed supercooling food preservation technology. It really started to open my eyes up to climate change and the devastation that was occurring in the world. At the time, I was working with engineers and I learned a lot about inventing and developing climate tech. And I really wanted to do something about reducing emissions and play a big part in decarbonisation. And that's how Kapture was founded. I then went away and worked on this technology for 18 months and was able to come up with a tech that can be retrofitted to diesel generators and really make the world rethink of how we are going to transition to clean energy. Currently, renewables and batteries have been developed, and they aren't the complete answer in solving this climate crisis. Diesel generators are still needed, and we need to decarbonize diesel generators in order to move towards, net zero and reaching climate targets. So there are a few things that get me out of bed each morning. The first one is I was recently in India, and you cannot breathe in India. It's literally, it feels like a permanent bushfire. And to think through our technology that we could clean up the air pollution in India and save lives is incredible. That kind of impact would be amazing to have on third world countries that rely heavily on diesel generators. I'm also a female in deep tech, and I'm not sure about the US, but in Australia, there's not many females in deep tech. And, we are building one of the coolest deep tech companies, and our ambition is to build one of the most impactful climate tech companies in the world. And I think that's really inspiring for our future generations. And that's something that really gets me out of bed every morning and something I'm so passionate about. And through this technology, I truly believe will have great impact in helping save the planet. It's the first technology in the world for carbon capture that can be scaled across millions of sites and have a real impact in reducing emissions. So that's really exciting. I think, this business will leave a legacy behind. So it's so much more than just building a startup. It's actually truly a company that will leave big impact, and that's really exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. I can imagine why that would pop you out of bed in the morning. So I think a lot of people, when they're thinking about climate tech, they assume that the transition into green tech will be a lot simpler. Like we just drop the fossil fuels and move forward. Can you talk a little bit about how that's kind of a misunderstanding and why we need some of these legacy technologies for several decades to come?
Yeah. So exactly how I view our technology is it will help us transition into clean energy. So for example, right now, if you take a mining company, they can't just switch off their diesel generators because renewable energy currently has a lot of restrictions on the grid and they cannot provide 24/7 backup power. And batteries are quite expensive and they also cannot provide 24/7 backup power. So diesel generators are still needed in both of those situations, and that's where our technology comes into play. And recently I was chatting with Plug and Play Ventures in the US, and they said that the number one problem that their corporate customers are trying to solve is to decarbonize their diesel generator. And Kapture's solution is the first solution in the world to be able to decarbonize a diesel generator. So that's really exciting. And basically, we will allow businesses to keep using their generator whilst they start adopting other cleaner technologies. And in actual fact, our technology, when it's used with biodiesel or renewable fuel, it actually turns into a green tech as well because we're capturing the emissions from the end. So we truly believe that all solutions are needed, but we will allow customers to, some customers can't afford to replace their diesel generator fleets, and it's quite expensive and it also emits more CO2 emissions in the process. So we'll allow people to slowly transition into, this new world of renewable energy.
Right. And your technology can play a big role at sea with ships too, right? Can you share a little bit about that?
Yes, so we are starting off with generators, but as you know, on ships, they also have diesel generators. So just exactly the same way on a ship, our technology can be retrofitted. We can take, the chemical solvent, run it through the filter. As it interacts with the gases, we capture the CO2 emissions, and then we can actually discard the byproduct directly back into the ocean. So we are looking into this at the moment, and it will be a huge game changer in terms of decarbonising the shipping sector, which currently has no solution.
Yeah, that's really, really amazing. Um, so, from your experience, it sounds like you had this passion and you went to go build a solution to it. So, this poster, I'm curious if you have any thoughts for this poster about the benefits, the pros and cons between coming up with a great idea and then seeing it through, or wanting to see some change in the world or start a business and then working towards the idea.
Yeah. I think with any startup, you truly need, a deep impact or something that really gets you out of bed. Like, you need to be solving a really big problem for a customer. It doesn't need to be, climate tech, but in any sector, especially right now when there's a lot of competition out there, you really need to be solving a big problem and making sure you validate that by product market fit before you get started. So
Yeah, when we were chatting off air, I found it so impressive that you had this passion to, um, reduce CO2 emissions, and you're not a scientist or an engineer. You're self-taught, and it was really cool to hear how you started with this problem that you wanted to solve, and then really educated yourself and trained yourself on how to achieve that. Can you share a little bit more about that?
yeah, so actually we pivoted. So last year, I met an advisor slash mentor in Australia. We originally were focusing on decarbonising buildings and heavy trucks. So we can actually decarbonise any diesel engine that has an exhaust. And we weren't getting product market fit at the time because buildings and heavy trucks, especially in Australia, they're not incentivized to reduce their emissions right now. So for us, we had to find out who is the low hanging fruit in terms of customer, who is desperate to reduce their emissions right now, who's under a lot of pressure. So it was a tier 1 corporate. And when we pivoted to diesel generators, customers were interested, we had a lot of interest from funding. Basically everything fell into place. So I think, before you get started on your startup, it's good to do a bit of background work, like find out, is there a demand for your product? Are VCs interested? You kind of need to get everyone aligned before you get started. Otherwise you won't get too far if, it's not all kind of lining up for you.
Mm-hmm. I think this poster is probably asking because they want to start a business and they're not really sure where to start. And it occurred to me, it occurred to me that they might be trying to force it a little bit, I guess. Like, I think a lot of people, and like in your situation, you were, working and going about your life, and you came across this need and filled you with passion and pursued your startup. Do you think, how much of a foundation in like your day-to-day life coming across a problem that you want to solve is important versus like, I'm going to start a startup, I'm going to go hunt for a problem? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think, it's tough for me to answer this question, because when I work on a business, it's something, it needs to come from deep within, I feel like you need to be 100% in and really passionate about the problem that you want to solve. If you're questioning whether it's a right problem or the right business to start, I think that kind of answers your question slightly as well, whether it's the right idea, because maybe you should look at something else. I think when you know or you've found the right idea and the right startup, you don't second guess if you want to get started. So
yeah, really well said. I completely agree with that. Well, I think we sufficiently answered this question. You're welcome for the unsolicited advice. Raj, thank you so much for being on the show. How can listeners connect with you?
Yeah, I recently joined Twitter, and that's how we actually connected, Luke. But so I'm at Raj Kapture, and that's with a K. And I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me at Raj Bagri.
Great. And your website is
Kapture.earth.
Kapture.earth. Great. All right.
Yeah, so if anyone is interested in decarbonising their diesel generators, you can send an inquiry through the website or contact me on Twitter as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much for being on the show. It was great hearing about the technology you're building. So exciting for everything to come for you. And once again, thank you for coming on the show and taking the time.
Thanks for having me, Luke.
Of course. Take care.
The Backseat Startup Podcast is brought to you by Startup Founder Daily, a media company focused on early stage companies. To learn more or apply to be featured for free, head over to startupfounderdaily.com. You can find the link in the description below.